Hang on, it takes a turnaround moment. Okay, there it goes.
Okay.
All right, Keyshawn, give us your story.
Here's the story. So I was just feeling sad. I don't know why. And I decided I was going to sit down with some determination that I don't have to feel this way. And I think that I continued to feel that way for the better part of an hour while sitting down.
Mm-hmm.
Until maybe the last 5 minutes where, I don't know, maybe something clicked, or, I just remembered something, and I just realized kind of that what I was doing was not really practicing in the way that this is an active practice, is what I realized.
Okay.
And I decided to take some sort of action. And on that in-breath, I decided that, on the in-breath, I decided that I could feel how I wanted to feel, that I could feel joy. And so, like, with that in-breath, I just really, I would say that I went back to confronting the breath is what I did. Decided to confront the breath, and when I did that, it was like, wow, I did that. Like, that was pretty nice. That was pretty good. Like, good job doing that. And as I continued to confront the breath, like on the in-breath and the out-breath, and feeling the relief of having done that, it just kind of built up, and it started to feel like really good. And then, like when I went to go to bed, I just kept doing it, and I would, like, on that in-breath, I would, like, know that this is a long in-breath. And once I knew that this is a long in-breath, it was, like, kind of like a very, like, successful, like, wow, I did that, and, like, almost, like, feeling, like, elated, like, flying almost, in a way, I would say. Is, like, kind of gives me, like, the feeling of vertigo, or like that falling feeling.
Okay.
A little
Or
bit of that.
perhaps they call it weightless.
Yes, I would say weightless, a weightless kind of feeling.
That's an interesting way to describe it, in fact, because that's lokatara, is when we feel on top of the world, literally. This is what the word lokatara means.
Yeah.
That's why, and it's called supramundane, that's the translation, but a much better way of saying it is you feel like you're on top of the world, literally. And that the breathing is really easy and nice, but there's also the other quality that you haven't mentioned yet, and that is the relief from the sadness. Did
Yeah.
you notice that the sadness was now missing? That this experience was empty of the sadness.
That actually became the main object on the out breath, would be that, wow, that's not here anymore. It feels so good.
Aha, okay, right. So you can actually get to the experience of letting it go almost as if you were breathing it out. Okay.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
why in this Anapanasati, the words are backwards from pranayana, because here the emphasis is not on the in breath, the emphasis is more on the out breath, in the sense of release and letting go and letting it all out. And surprisingly enough, what I just talked about in a metaphorical or almost imaginary and therefore magical sense, there's a reality base under that. And in fact, that's exactly what's kind of happening with the blood oxygen content. That the blood is changing. Things are really happening inside the body with this kind of breathing that doesn't happen when people sit in a meditation posture and are not working with the breath, because it's actually the breath itself is tied to the body, and when your breathing changes, so does your body chemistry. The
Yeah.
very easiest way for anyone to understand that is to understand that carbon dioxide mixed with water becomes an acid called carbonic acid. Have you ever heard of carbonic acid? It's also called acid rain. Have you ever heard of acid rain?
Yes.
Had, had a big problem with it in Canada for a while. What was that? There was a lot too much carbon dioxide in the rainwater, so that when it hits the ground, it's acidic and it starts eating stuff rather than just being what water does. Now it's an acid. Okay, so a little bit more body chemistry, and you'll understand that um, oxygen uh, comes in and mixes with whatever we ate and whatever's already in the bloodstream in the sense, and that's what causes carbon dioxide. Is when fuel inside the body is burned, it gives off carbon dioxide, and that's what we breathe out. But while it's in the blood, guess what? It's acidic. And this is exactly how the brain works in the back. It's almost like a little valve or a little thing that when the acidic level of the blood gets to a certain level, then the body itself will take a deep breath, such as a yawn. Or if you're in strenuous exercise, that's what forces you to breathe really hard. And that really most uncomfortable breath. I mean, it's so uncomfortable that we even have it in our language to catch the breath, which means let me catch my breath means let me stop breathing so hard because I can't even talk because I'm out of breath. Let me catch my breath. You know what I'm talking about. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that the monoxide or carbon dioxide level in the blood is very, very high. Why? Because we've been working really hard. We've been swimming, or we've been pressing weights, or we've been arguing, or puffing in anger, and all of that kind of stuff. Okay, you can see that the breathing is directly related to the conditioning of the body. And so taking these long, deep breaths actually is the way of really purifying and getting out all of the kind of stuff that we would call, without having to name them, the chemical reactions of sadness. The chemistry in the body of sadness, whatever sadness is in the body, by taking deep breaths, we begin to remove the residue of that out of the blood, allowing for the rest of it to break up and get into the blood, and then we breathe that out too. And wow, what a relief it is to be able to move that sadness out within 5, 10, 15 minutes. I mean, how long would you have sat being sad before it passed away naturally, which when I say passed away naturally means that you did something like get up. In fact, one of the cures of sadness is taking a walk. Okay. Why? Because it changes the breathing. And then that whole chemistry system. And also the other part of it is that generally we get ourselves into a state of sadness because of the kinds of thoughts that we're having, and not necessarily that we're thinking of a sad time and therefore we are sad, but rather that to say that unwholesome thoughts will then lead to unwholesome feelings, just like the wholesome thoughts that you started to having in your practice of, wow, this feels nice, and oh, I can let that stuff go, and you keep talking to yourself about that, and that's what actually begins to happen at a chemistry level. Precisely. That literally you can talk yourself into feeling good. I think you've heard me say that before. But
Yeah.
while you were sad, you were also talking yourself into feeling sad without probably recognizing those kinds of thoughts were happening. However, I will also say that there is sometimes sadness comes up without that actual trigger. In fact, the trigger can be so stark that it can be nothing but one mind moment or one flash that starts that sadness cycle going, and then it just builds. And it might build. And the interesting part is that you said is you didn't know why. And I picked up on that. That was the first thing you started off with, is I was sad, but I didn't know why. Guess what? If you want to know why, that's one thing. If you saw what happened and you saw why you got sad, that's different. One's confusion and the other one is knowledge. Right? One's confusion, the other one's knowledge. So if you don't know why, and then you want to know why, sorry, you've already missed it. That cup's already broken on the floor. You missed it. You didn't catch it in time. Okay? But sometimes the water bottle will fall off the table and you catch it before it hits the ground. And don't break. Okay? So how quick are you going to be about how the sadness comes? So now we can look at it differently. Instead of saying, I don't know why, oh, poor me, what happened, we can say, hot dog, I'm going to watch next time. All right? Next time I'm going to figure that out. I'm going to be on guard for that. I'm going to start watching that one.
I'll tell you what, the next morning when I woke up, I immediately kind of woke up and I think I was like, oh shoot, it's like, I'm so tired. Like, and I was like, I was ready to start spiraling into whatever typical nonsense I was spiraling into. But then I just saw that happening. And I was like, wait a minute, I could just feel good. Like I was doing it last night. And then I just was like, and then I just started taking the deep breath. And once I came to know that breath, like this is a long in breath. It was like, wow, I feel like so much better right now. Like I feel amazing. And I kept.
It is. Excellent.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you're telling me this because it is reaffirmation. Because when I tell students, they say, fine, Dhammarato said it. But now you're actually saying, yes, this actually does work, that we can actually feel tired. Sometimes we wake up in the morning and feel tired, and then we want to escape. And because we want to escape, we escape away actually from the breath, not recognizing that, hey, all I need to do is take a deep breath to give myself the very oxygen that I am craving for. And when I crave for that oxygen, I'm actually just having that feeling of being tired. Hence, that's why tiredness and not breathing well has the natural response of a yawn. What is a yawn, by the way? It's a really interesting, strange kind of in-breath followed by a really big exhale. Oh, but it's always got that in-breath in it. There's a really deep in-breath, and it comes quite quickly. Go, right? And it happens naturally. Why? Is because your blood oxygen has gotten to the point that the brain is saying, wait a minute, we got to take a breath here. And so in that regard, yawning is actually good for people. It's not good for people if they're in a meeting and yawn, because that means the boss knows you're not paying attention. Why? Because you've gotten tired. Why are you gotten tired? Because you're not breathing well. So all of this stuff kind of fits together. I think we lost Keyshawn.
Yeah, we lost him. Oh, who knows what happened? But no, well.
Oh, he's back.
Yeah.
Keyshawn, are you there? Yes, I hear a mic come on now.
I picked up on my phone.
Yeah, your video is not on yet, but I can hear your mic just come on.
I wonder why I cut out there. Should we continue?
Yes, we can continue right along. What was the last thing that you heard?
Yawning, being tired.
Yes, we were talking about the yawning and being tired. So we can also see then immediately that taking a deep breath when we're tired is going to reoxygenate the body and we begin to feel better. And if we continue to to continue to breathe, we continue to begin to feel better. And that betterness has actually got chemistry and physiology and biology and all of that stuff mixed in with it, where it actually goes together. But the Buddha had figured this out without any of our biology or chemistry knowledge back in his day. But he did know about breathing. And so that's why he incorporated it into the practice to the point of giving it that name, which was anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing. But the way that the Anapanasati Sutta is written, like at each step, for instance, gladdening the mind, it will say mindfully breathing in and mindfully breathing out, one gladdens the mind. Now, that whole idea of gladdening the mind is basically coming from many other places in the suttas, but it's explicitly spelled out in the Anapanasati Sutta as gladdening the mind. But basically, what it means is to remove unwholesome thoughts, and that's one's right effort. One's right effort is to remove the unwholesome thoughts, whatever the unwholesome thoughts were that were bringing on sadness. Now you have changed those thoughts into gladness, the kind of thoughts that bring on gladness. But many times we don't even know where the sadness came from. Oh, hello, I can see you.
I'm back on the computer here.
All right. So that gladness then is partially physiologically because we actually feel better because we're breathing better. And it's also that because the mind is thinking wholesome thoughts, the whole blood chemistry begins to change, that new chemicals come into the brain and all of that kind of stuff. It's actually quite amazing that the Buddha's teaching works so well, and he didn't know anything about neurophysiology. He just knew it from an absolutely practical way. And so one of the ways that he taught, in fact, this is so beautiful that I should start telling this story more often. And that is that because we keep talking about using one's right effort in order to bring in and bring on wholesome thoughts. So the story that the Buddha tells in Sutta number 19 is the story of a cow herder that is in the first taking his cows down the trail that's in a populated area, so that he has to use a stick to hit the cows to keep them from stepping on kids or busting down a stall or whatever like that. And he's got to pay really close attention to them to get them to not do any damage. They've got to walk down that path without causing harm, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because, in fact, it's actually dangerous. Because if that cow steps on that kid, the cow herd is going to have hell to pay. But once he gets the herd of cows out into the pasture, say where the rice fields have already been gleaned and the cows are there to eat the stubble, now he doesn't have to pay so close attention. Doesn't have to beat them, go to that stub and go to that one. All he needs to do is to watch care over them to make sure that there they are. There they are. Okay, now the guarding is different. So in the mind, the first part of the guarding is that we've got to guard the thoughts, or our cows. We have to guard those thoughts to keep them from going off into an unwholesome place. Because why? Because there's hell to pay. What hell? Sadness.
I feel like
Okay,
I'm
so
experiencing similar to that. I mean, the story I was telling, it didn't really end there, and we could maybe tie this back into the Loka Tara thing that you talked about, just because throughout the day, as I continue to practice and like just throughout the day, it's like breathing, watching the breath, and gladdening the mind on the breath. It just started to grow and grow in terms of like little Nibbana moments I'm taking when I sit down, just like become like really kind of big Nibbana moments, and I really feel like that Lokatara, or like being like an emperor. Like I really like feel like I'm like the boss here, basically. And it's like I'm not gonna feel that anymore. But like I was pointing out to Yosu that like I was at the gym and I just saw myself starting to think about I'm not gonna be able to do my full workout, and so I was like gonna feel sad about that. And then I just noticed that I was like, wait a minute, I don't have to think about that at all. I can just feel good. There's no point in feeling bad. It doesn't even make any sense.
exactly. And congratulations for that. Yes, that's actually seeing a thought come up and recognize, hey, I don't have to do that. Or, hey, don't let that cow run into that uh, post or whatever. Let's hit it with a stick. Let's guide it. Now, when we talk about the cowherd hitting it with a stick, the Buddha wants to make sure that the emphasis is not upon any violence within the mind, but rather just guidance out of the unwholesome into the wholesome. But that's one's right effort. We have to take that much effort to whack that cow to keep it from stepping in some mess, right? So in the out of the analogy and into the actual work, one's right view is to know the difference between what is wholesome and what is not wholesome, and we have to take an effort to then change our view from an unwholesome view into a wholesome view. And then the second part of that process is to change the mind in the sense of to change the thought from an unwholesome thought to a wholesome thought. Why? Because we've already gotten the idea that our one's right noble view is to live, we're going to have wholesome thoughts. We now begin to see how dangerous unwholesome thoughts are. So
Yeah.
now we're going to have the view that I shall have the practice of being wholesome in thinking. So that's one's right view. And then in the moment by moment, with the sati comes so that we can say, yep, I can see that one, whack, you get out of here. And that it can come up in that kind of language that the Buddha uh, talked about it is, aha, I see you, Mara. That's the whack of that stick. But it's joyful, it's playful, it's a nurturing. Don't go there, you know? It's not a desperate place, but it's a very relaxed. I don't. I because I whacked the cow. He didn't step on that child. Isn't that a relief? I didn't go there. So this is the way that we begin to train the mind more and more. But this training that we get started off in when we're doing a formal practice, then becomes our method of thinking all the time, to recognize that in fact there was something that happened that triggered sadness. But an important part is that we don't really know in arrears what the sadness came from. But you do know that you have felt sad before. That wasn't the first time. Because if it was the first time you'd felt sadness, you would have said, what the hell is this?
Something funny about that too? I saw that I had that same kind of thinking. Was like, shoot, like this is like the typical thought. Like this has been the whole, like, let's try something new. Like, let's feel good for a change, you know? It's just like, why continue to do the same status quo?
Exactly so. So, this is the point then, is that for a while, we have to ride herd on that herd of thoughts. Or we have to be on guard for them so that we begin to get into the habit of having only wholesome thoughts. That way, we develop being in the state of having wholesome thoughts so that we now have a much easier job to do, and that is just to keep a watch over to make sure that they're wholesome, which is a whole lot different than being firmly right on guard or right ready to jump on it, because any new thought that comes by is more likely to be unwholesome than it is to be wholesome. So we really got to guard. But as we begin to get very good at guarding, and also in the habit over time of having wholesome thoughts over and over and over again by practicing them, then they become what you could actually call easier. It's easier to have wholesome thoughts than it is to have unwholesome thoughts. And so most of them just begin to be wholesome, which means we begin to feel good a lot. We're breathing well often. And so then when a thought that will occur, a thought of having to write an email, a thought of somebody dying, a thought of a dog dying, a thought of anything like that, and just that one little thought can trigger that valve, and sometimes it triggers it to the point of just turning the valve just enough to leak just a little bit of adrenaline, and we wind up having a very, very low-grade anxiety. And sometimes we can have a thought, and that valve turns on full-on sadness. Oh, and we just lose it. and now we become focused on, look how bad I feel, without recognizing, look what happened in the mind. It was so easy to trigger that. But it only took like one thought moment, and that's what took us, it's like pulling the trigger of a gun and bang. I mean, once you pull that trigger, it's almost like once you hit that send button on that email, it's gone. You cannot get it back again. It happened, right? And that's the same thing in the mind. Is some things just bang, they just happen like that. Just one little thing will set that sadness or that anger off. For musicians, one sour note will get them pissed right off. Just one note. Just they hear that note and they don't like the rest of the piece. A whole concerto can be ruined in the first movement by just missing one note.
Yeah.
For some people, they hear that and now the whole piece is ruined for them. They just, that's what happens with us. That not just with music, but with many, many things. An example of that is that you're on the way to work, or you're on the way to an appointment. Maybe you're on the way to a job interview. And on the way there, immediately you remember or recognize that you didn't bring your cell phone, or you didn't bring this, that, or the other thing that you need for that appointment. And immediately we go into panic mode. One thought, one mind moment, and now, and I got to get back to the house and get that thing and get back in the car and get back to that place as soon as I would have gotten there ordinarily, except now I've got to make an extra round trip in there. And I'm a madman out on the road.
Dangerous.
Ever happened to you?
I think so. Well, you know what? That happened to me. That I feel like that happens on a daily basis. In the sense that when you let's say you have an assignment or something due and now there is a problem that has come up. So now your path towards completion has a roadblock to it.
Right.
And now, in order to reach the completion in the same time period you had initially set up, you don't have to climb this hill and get to that same point in the same amount of time with a big roadblock in the way.
Exactly, which brings on anxiety. Why? Because the human anatomy is built that in case of emergency, 10,000, 100,000, a million years ago, when there was an emergency, the major possible options were fight or flight.
Yeah.
Fight or flight. And that means running or doing activity. That's why the adrenaline that comes into the body is getting us ready for war. And guess what? Generally, let us say whatever it is, it doesn't require any major fight or flight mechanisms to happen, but we have given ourselves the chemical bath to get us ready for fight or flight. And now we're going to sit in our chair and solve that problem on the computer or whatever like that, just absolutely pumped up with adrenaline. And with that adrenaline in the blood, guess what? We can't think very well. And so we're likely to start making a whole bunch of mistakes. An example of that, in fact, would be the musician himself who makes that first mistake in that first piece. He keeps thinking about it and thinking about it and worrying about it and worried, can I do the next one? And he begins to have adrenaline in his body that he doesn't need to play the music.
Something interesting about that, though, is that I can think about a time recently where I had some sort of deadline to hit, and it was coming up in the next 30 minutes. This has got to get has to get done in the next 30 minutes. And
so you told yourself.
Yeah, so I told myself, right. I wonder just because when I was doing that though, I was so in the zone. Doing that, and getting it done. It was I don't know if I could have done that without an adrenaline rush. If I would have done it slowly and relaxed, it probably wouldn't have gotten done.
Okay. Well, now you can see that is the body chemistry. And if getting the job done was the intention, then you got what you needed to do that, and you got the job done. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Okay. However, having that adrenaline when it's not appropriate for most tasks actually will cloud the mind. An example of that would be Sudoku. That to play expert level Sudoku, you have to be relaxed and open and focused. And if you get uptight, the mind will jump around too much to be able to see the intricate connections. And so Sudoku is one game that you can't play when you're uptight. You really do have to relax the mind to play it.
Yeah.
And then everything just falls right into place. It's like you see that connection and you can see things to fit together faster than you can click the mouse or push the screen. When you're in that state, you can see things because the mind is so fast, right?
I wonder if that applies to I'm thinking about shooting video games, that kind of thing. Which one would be more effective, adrenaline or relaxed?
Depends upon the game, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. And guess what? Many games are in fact mixed.
Mm-hmm.
So that if you're very adrenaline oriented, you'll play the game in one way, and if you're very relaxed, you'll play the game another way. And I don't know if they've done enough experiments on that kind of stuff to figure out who wins. but I
Yeah.
would rather be relaxed while I'm playing the game. Perhaps I would rather be relaxed playing the game than whether I win it or not. In that old saw of it doesn't matter who wins or loses, it's how you play the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't mind if you don't mind if I eat, right? While I do this. I need to eat dinner, so I was gonna either jump off or continue watching you guys.
I'm sorry I don't follow what you just said.
I was saying I gotta eat dinner, but I would like to continue watching the discussion.
Oh, okay. You got to eat, or you want to eat.
I want to eat, and then I gotta go to
You want to eat, and then what did you say?
bed. To bed.
Okay, all right, okay. Um, why don't you just hang off on the eating, and every time that you see the food and think about I want it, then you can note that and let it pass.
Okay. Okay.
Um, so that's one way to do it. Uh, Gosh, we got a new caller coming on. I don't think that it works very well with four. Uh, so I'll wait for that later. Uh, so meanwhile, we were talking about uh, feelings, how they can come up very quickly, and so that's why those feelings that come up quickly, that's important to be on guard. And so, kind of an aside note, but really an important feature of that is that when we are on guard and making sure that all the thoughts that are wholesome, then when something happens that would have normally triggered anger or sadness, will trigger wisdom instead, in the sense of sati. We wake up. So as soon as that trigger happens, instead of going off into that feeling sequence, we wake up at that point when it contacts us, when that thing hits us, like the example of the realization that I didn't bring the cell phone on and I needed to find my way into the building or something like that. And so when I realized that I've missed something, instead of panicking, I might as well just ordinarily turn the car around, take some deep breaths, and go get the cell phone and then go back to the appointment, and everything is okay. But if I get to that appointment having been in a panic and still am in a panic, I might in fact blow the first 5 minutes of that interview if the interview happens right after I get out of the car and I'm still half in panic mode and still haven't gotten myself out of panic mode. Right? So the whole idea then is that when can we wake up to the panic mode that we're in, or in the case that you were using, sadness, or in another case would be anger, or just a low grade anxiety. And so when we begin to wake up to that and say, oh, there it is. Oh, there you are. I don't know how long you've been there or what triggered you, but I see you. Ah, I can see you. And so when we wake up finally to it, that's the sati. And that's when we can, because now the goat, or excuse me, the cow herder is looking at where the goats or where the cows are. And so now we can whack it and say, get out of there. You do not belong eating that kind of groceries. Get your face out of that person's table. Okay? So that's the way. So when we wake up and recognize what's happening, that's when we come back to the practice immediately. That we have to bring wholesome thoughts in. Wholesome thoughts, take a deep breath, be relaxed, get the mind in a wholesome state, and then keeping it there. And now we can be on guard to keep it there, which is a whole lot better than occasionally waking up to find out that our thoughts are off into into making a mess. And look how bad we've already let ourselves feel. And so this is when we become a little more diligent in the watching until we come to the conclusion that, yeah, but right now every thought is absolutely hunky-dory. Everything is just nice now. Been that way for a long time now. So I've learned to sustain it finally. Okay, so this brings us back to the first two skills that are needed. Is one is to get ourselves into that wholesome, happy state. And then number two is to be able to sustain it by not letting those unwholesome thoughts come back in and remain. We kick them back out. But there will come a time when there's nothing left but one wholesome thought after another, after another, after another. And that's what we're shooting for is can you maintain or sustain that so that every thought that comes by is absolutely up to scratch.
No reason to have it.
So having, pardon?
It's like no reason to have it otherwise is what it seems like.
All right. So now that I've finished with that, do you have any other questions or do you want to go get dinner?
I don't have any questions.
Huh? All right. Well, you can do what you want to then, and I'll talk with Izu for a while.
Okay. All right. Good to see you guys.
All right. You don't have to turn it off if you don't want to. You can listen on.
I can listen on. Okay.
Yeah. Is that okay with Izu?
I'll
I
turn the
suppose.
camera so I'm not distracting you guys with my food. How about that?
So how's it going, Izu? Good to see you again, really. I'm glad to really see you.
It's been like 2 weeks
Yeah.
since I called you. Yeah, yeah. Well, I've been experiencing some moments of anger actually, and many things that you said to like when you were talking with Keyshawn. Is his name pronounced Keyshawn or Keyshawn?
He didn't never tell me I was wrong when I said Keyshawn.
Well, our friend, and well, actually, what was happening in my mind was that I could, like, maybe for a second or 2 seconds, get out of the unwholesome state, but then, like, the mind was talking again, like, talking me again into a anger, and I actually had to physically, like, impede myself of doing like anything when my mind was like angry, because I was quite aware that it would break out like in a really bad thing. So there was this cycle, like it was a really strong cycle. But
Well, you're good that you're beginning to see that cycle.
yeah,
That you bring it wholesome and then it goes back to the unwholesome. You bring it back to wholesome and it goes back to the unwholesome. And that's the waking up process.
hmm,
And so the part of the waking up process also has to do with the determination to have the right effort to
uh-huh.
start watching, to be on guard, so that you begin to look quicker, can find that anger quicker, that it doesn't last for long periods of time before you actually recognize, oh, I don't have to feel angry. You can, within 1 or 2 minutes of anger, or even one, 5 or 10 seconds of anger.
I think it also has to do with um like actually how to say it, having confidence in in the wholesomeness, maybe, because, well, for at least for me it was like sometimes a sense of like, this is the right thing to do, this is kind of like righteous anger sometimes, And
I understand that. That's very, very delicious. That all that absolves us of our anger, or kind of makes the anger okay,
uh-huh,
right?
yeah,
Guess
and
what? Guess
well,
what? That's just delicious thinking, that we can only see then the part of the anger that we like, because when we're angry, we feel really powerful. We like it that we can get our way finally. That in fact, anger is kind of a reaction to, or an overlying feeling, and the underlying feeling is the feeling of fear, or the feeling that I'm being attacked, or the feeling of that I've lost something. And so the anger is now my regaining my power, because when
mm,
I've lost something and I'm sad, and then I'm afraid, then that's a victim's position. So we wind up taking the victim's position and turning it upside down, and we use it with all of this energy that we have with the adrenaline coming in, and so that gives us the delicious feeling of being powerful.
mm-hmm,
But,
mm,
and there's a great big but, and that is that when we feel powerful like that, it's a trigger for other people, and and they go then through the same cycle, which your power then makes them afraid, and then their anger reaction mechanism will kick in, and now you've got two people angry. And in fact, generally what happens is that when someone is angry, they want the other people around them to also be angry. For instance, if he is angry at the bank, then he wants everybody in the room to be angry at the bank. If he's angry at a politician, he wants everybody to be angry at that politician. And if he's angry at one person, he wants that person to be angry back at him. And so anger loves anger. It's a
mm-hmm,
sympathetic. It attracts in that sense. So and it goes into a phrase of misery loves company. Well, not only does misery love company, but anger loves company. And not only does misery and angry love company, but guess what? Joy also loves company. Your choice.
mm-hmm,
So, when we get angry, that means that we're inviting other people to be angry. Now we've got anger, but it's not mine anymore. Now other people are angry, and now that kind of be dangerous. And the whole point that I'm getting around to is to get you to, at least right now, to understand that anger is dangerous. And when you see that it's dangerous, then that danger and knowledge of that danger will then become more powerful or more important than the feeling of righteous, I'm the big dude and I'm right and you ought to do it this way because I've got a set of rules that I got from some old book. And because I've got some rules from an old book that you're not following makes me better than you. And that's the whole idea behind anger, is that righteous, I've got the right and you don't, and I'm better than you are. And that gives me permission to be violent, either in my language or in my actions. And not recognizing when we feel like that yes, it feels very powerful, but it's also very dangerous. And when we can see the danger in it, that's and only then can we see the escape. You see, what you said was absolutely correct. Is that, well, sometimes when I'm angry, I really like it. Well, if you really like it, then you are not going to give it up just because some old fat man said to. No, you got to actually see the danger in it for yourself. And once you see how dangerous those feelings are, then you'll want to avoid them. You'll want to set up barriers saying, I'm not going to go there, that I don't have to respond with anger. And once you make up that your mind that you're not going to go there, now you begin to be on guard to keep that cow from stepping on the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So you have to see the danger first. You have to see that letting the feelings of anger out and expressing them is dangerous.
I lost you for like 2 seconds, and I didn't hear the last thing you said.
Okay, what I said was is that so the first thing is that we have to learn that anger is dangerous. Ill will is dangerous. And when we recognize that it's dangerous to behave angry, then we begin to go deeper and recognize that it's actually unwholesome to feel angry. Then why should I even feel like this? This is actually not a pleasant feeling to be angry. That's one of the reasons why we get angry and get righteous is because we're actually trying to give other people or get rid of our anger. Because if I get what I want, if I tell you what to do, sit down and shut up, and you actually sit down and shut up, now I can feel better. I don't have to be angry. I got my way. That's delusional. Because
Mm.
just because we're angry does not mean that we're going to get our way. Sometimes when we say sit down and shut up, somebody's not going to sit down and they're not going to shut up, and things just get worse. Right? And so anger, when we recognize that it doesn't always work. And not only does it not always work, but it always is something uncomfortable. It's always unpleasant.
It is. It is.
Even when we get our way, it's still unpleasant. That's why we wanted to get our way, was to get rid of this feeling of being enraged. And we don't like the body chemistry of what it does. And not only that, but you can tell when you are angry that it at least makes you breathe, but it's still making you breathe rather than you doing the breathing. So that in
Mm.
fact, if you actually take control of the breath and start breathing consciously, that will actually help dissipate the anger once you want to. But you got to want to get rid of the anger first before you're actually going to take the right effort to do so.
Mm.
And the way to see that you want to get rid of it is by seeing the danger of it. So, in that regard, now we're talking about right view comes first.
Uh-huh.
Wrong view is that I can get advantage out of being angry. Right view is that oh no, it's better to be peaceful and calm, and at peaceful and calm I may be able to get what I want anyway. But being angry has got its own problems, whether I get my way or not. When we begin to see things in a more clear way, now with that right effort of changing our attitude or our view about it, now we can begin to change the anger itself when it arises. When we see that anger come up, we can say, hey, wait a minute. I don't have to feel that way. I can feel any way I want to. Let me sit here and breathe. Okay. And I would say also for it in this regard is that the goal would be is to catch the anger before it becomes verbal, which sometimes is really hard because many times as soon as something happens, the next thing that happens will be an ah! Or, "Ah!" And so can you catch the anger before that even happens? Can you slow it down to the point that you don't even have to say anything? You can just deal with the anger before you even say anything at all.
I can, yeah, but sometimes I can't. It's been like maybe 4 or 5 months since I actually said something harsh, but it's almost daily I say something moved by a really like kind of subtle or small, really small kind of like anger, level of anger. Yeah. So it's still there, in a lesser level, but it is still there. Yeah.
Okay. So be on guard.
Uh-huh. I
Be
think.
on guard for that. And so as soon as it comes, and you can kind of make a like a not to do list. And anger is at the top of the not to do list, to be on guard, to not do anger. As soon as you see anger, you can say, oh, I got that one. But as you're saying, hey, if it's been quite a while since you've been angry, then your not to do list doesn't need that particular item on it. But it does in the sense that if you do get angry, then you want to be able to catch it. But I would congratulate you if you've been 6 months without being angry. That's a remarkable achievement.
I've actually been thinking, well, I'm going to ask you, what about counteracting it with loving kindness?
Well, isn't loving kindness a wholesome thought?
Yeah.
Yeah, I rest my case.
Hmm.
Yeah, to have wholesome thoughts and loving kindness, or in fact, just kindness, kindness to yourself, kindness to others. This is why I use the word nurturing. That's
Uh-huh.
kindness, to be gentle, to be kind to yourself,
Mm-hmm.
to be easygoing. That in fact, that's the part of the story about the cows is that in the first part, that's one's right effort, is to get the cows to start to have wholesome behavior, or the thoughts are wholesome. But it's a whole lot less work to be on guard for them to being unwholesome, because after you've practiced well, now all we have to do is just make sure that all the cows are there, all the thoughts are wholesome, and that's a whole lot easier. And so we really are going in the direction of being free from the tensions and worries of all of those bad feelings and all of those bad thoughts, now to being down to only wholesome thoughts. And so we don't have to even work so hard. And so now we're down to a level of just easy going, making sure that the thoughts are just wholesome. And that's the direction that we go in. And eventually we'll see that even those thoughts, now that we know that they're always wholesome, we can begin to even put some gaps in between,
Mm.
so that we don't even have to have one after another wholesome thought. We can just have an occasional wholesome thought.
Mm.
And now that's a deeper practice. But first we have to get the mind just into wholesome thoughts, to not allow unwholesome thoughts to arise. And so we begin to get on guard. Make sure those thoughts are wholesome. Don't don't let thoughts of emails or thoughts of work to come in and disturb your mind. No, just stay right here, right now. Everything is good. Everything is fine.
Mm.
Share that metta. Have that joy. Just take it easy, and let all those thoughts be wholesome.
Yeah. Right.
Okay? So practice that way, and you'll
That.
begin with that to feel really good, just like Keyshawn is saying, that, wow, it feels so nice.
Yeah.
Okay? So
So
I'll let you go now. It's been about an hour. Do you have any more questions?
no, no, everything's good.
Well, this is really good to see you again. I'm really glad to see you.
Me too. Yeah.
As you can tell, it's all about right here, right now. We don't have to worry about something happened way in the future or way long ago. I don't know. I don't care. I want to know, how good is it right now?
Mm-hmm.
Mm. We'll see you.